Okay, that particular clock is a few minutes slower than mine, and mine's a little fast. We'll split the difference. We'll say it's 7:30 and we'll get going. I thank all of you for coming this evening. I don't think anybody's come in since the sign-in sheet went around. We're going to pick up with our agenda for the evening. We're here primarily, we do this every year to go into the community, gives us a chance to go in the community, but also a chance to hear from the community. And that's certainly what we want to do with them in the past year. Trying to keep things organized, we ask if anyone would like to speak at the work session and tell us what their topic is. We have a record of that as well. We had two individuals that indicated they would like to this evening. And Mr. St. Germain, the first topic was the town.
Well, my question is, in the last 10 years, sales tax has doubled, and the assessed valuation has doubled. Isn't it time our taxes started going down instead of going up 14% tax increase like we had last year?
The brain is trying to think faster than the tongue right now, John, to be honest with you. I would certainly sign that petition as well. I think all of us would. Unfortunately, the sales tax could quadruple, but that's not the whole budget. It's a portion, and that portion of the budget would certainly quadruple. As you know, in every municipality, every school district's had a problem. The funding has not kept up with the cost of things like asphalt, salt, retirement insurances, I mean, it goes on and on and on, has grown just shooting off the hip exponentially compared to that. We've also, especially last year, for this year's budget, tried to approach budgeting in a very different way, and I'm optimistic that by the end of this year we're going to see some fruits of that, and we'll plug it into year 2, 2015, and we'll see even more. Big concern, I said it many times last fall, is with the whole fiscal stress and having reserve. The comptroller's right, but I got a governor that says this is the rainy day, it's flooding out there, spend your reserves because that's what it's for, and you're not getting any more. A good business model, you aren't flying by the seat of your pants. Sales tax is huge for the town of Plattsburgh, and for a lot of years we used that to enable us not to have a town-wide tax. You probably well remember there was one. I don't remember exactly the number. I want to say it was 2. Yeah, I think it was 2 something then.
2.5.
Yeah, good.
That was the entire budget. Sales tax was 800, and they only used half of it.
Yeah. And we've talked at some length about the models, and I think you'll see some more focused conversation in the future from this board. Would we be better off, as some communities do, give all the sales tax to the county, which, as you know, will drop the county tax for town residents, and substitute that with a town tax? Probably the 5 of us have 5 different views on that, and each one is correct. At the end of the day, you've got to have revenue to offset cost. We were careful not to cut services. We put more fees on services, especially recreation, that we used to give away. You probably heard us formally and informally talk about we can't give it away anymore. Water rates were that way. We got rid of the flat rate. We had water going, and still do maybe, at a price that's lower, selling it at a price that's lower than what it cost us to produce it. You just can't keep running that way. I think there's a long history of using the sales tax to keep things going, and that's something we're trying to get off. I don't know, John, on the other side of assessment, one of the things I've learned over the years, if everybody's, an assessment and appraisal are different. If everybody's assessment by our assessor is at a market value, whatever the levy is, it's going to be as fair as it could be. Where we really have the problem, and every now and then Brian comes in and he's like, oh, I better tell you because your phone's going to be ringing. But he finds a property that hadn't been reevaluated in a long time, or with the pictometry now, you can do so much more right from the computer. You see the paved driveways, the garages, the decks that were never put into the file, were never added to the value of that property, and it should. You still have the same levy, but if my house is at 100% and yours is, we kind of want everybody else to be there. And for some people, they have gone. For some, they've gone down for reasons as well. It's a strange kind of process, and you kind of move it and put it here and there, and do you really change anything? The big question will be, and it's one of those conversations I've had with our finance manager, and we've been talking about, Mike's been working with us a lot too, and putting together a finance committee, which would be people that are not part of the town's board and governance, but have business expertise, financial expertise to work and consult. And that would be a big question. Would it be best to return the sales tax 100% and manage that over, a town-wide tax? It might be, there are a lot of advantages to that. And I'm sure for anybody, any of us, remember, we live in this town-owned property too. If that means my net payment goes down some, that's a pretty good idea. If it means my payment in taxes and fees the end of the year goes up some, that was a dumb idea. It's like a balloon, push it here, it pulls out over there. I mean, are we playing games, or is there something real to that? I'll tell you, my 90 years experience in building a budget, building it on sales tax is like Russian roulette. Building it on a constant that I've got some degree of control, and something the community has some control over by the vote, seems a better way to me. And you're on the board, John. I was more concerned what the county was doing with the sales tax generated in the town. Having fought and lost many times trying to get more of the sales tax we generate, because we do generate most of it, I'm ready to say maybe that's the smarter way. And it would keep things under control, keep them level and constant.
Well, I know that usually if you have to budget against a sales tax rate, then it changes your whole budgeting aspect.
Sure.
Versus when you don't have to be concerned about a tax rate, only eventually the sales tax won't carry it anymore, then you're going to get to, like you did with the highway, finally start to have a highway tax that we hadn't had in years.
And that really is the point. It did exist, and I think anybody who's an elected official that can go out and say, I cut the tax, I limit, which was wonderful. But if we had kept the highway tax back then, and that reasonable town tax back then, and taken in the other revenue that you could have pushed back to the county, I mean, a lot of things would have been different, a lot less anxiety. That's going to be a priority conversation. We've had it informally a lot. Highway tax is a great example. My perspective, I never lost a discussion when we started the highway tax. As soon as people realized somebody's paying for those roads, to plow them, to maintain them, to pave them, and so on and so forth. And the ones who put the worst hurt on those roads aren't paying. Homeowners are. But as soon as we had even a small highway tax, that meant the quarry, UPS, all the businesses that are putting the wear on the roads are contributing. And that meant even though my home had to contribute, what that multi-million-dollar business contributed was quite a difference. So yeah, it does make sense in that way. all of us as middle-class people, it does, a lot of books written that way, and the economists have talked about it, but it does distribute the burden based on the wealth versus just sharing it equally. And there's a lot of value to a town tax and return all the sales tax. I'm very much in favor of furthering that discussion this year. Because we got to do something about it.
Yeah.
It's been pretty good to us, but boy, we can't control it. When it isn't good to us, we're in trouble.
Whatever way we pay for it, we're paying for civilization, and the costs that it takes to keep up any infrastructure that we've already got, or to add infrastructure when people build or something, is a cost that has to be borne by all the people if we're going to be able to continue as a community. And sometimes, as money has decreased, and this has been a constant over the last 25, 30 years, has decreased the money that we pay in taxes to the federal government and state government that came back to a town, a community, a school, has decreased and decreased. And that was based on everyone's income tax. Since that decreased, the burden comes then to the town, the school system, whatever, and then you have just property tax. And that's, to me, unfair, but that's the way I see it in terms of it.
Yeah, it really is a big discussion.
The other problem with diverting all the sales tax revenue back to the county is when you do that, even though it's applying it to the county tax levy and effectively reducing the tax levy in the town. You only do that so long, and pretty soon it becomes viewed at that level as their revenue. And they forget that it was revenue that was going to the townships, and the townships directed that revenue. Now, most of the towns have no choice about where the revenue goes. We do, because we're a Class 1 town. Back years ago, county government literally at one point in time maintained that we didn't have a right to that revenue. And it was from an association of towns meeting that we came back with the evidence that we did have the right to that revenue as a Class 1 town. And we were able to compel that they would have to give that revenue to us. And that kind of changed things a bit. So there's a leeriness on my part to let go of the revenue, because once you've done that, you lose control over the revenue. And the reality is that the county completely can direct how that sales tax revenue gets allocated.
No.
You can shake your head all you want, John, you're wrong. Yes, they
The
do.
law says that
The
it has to be
city,
used to reduce the tax levy. Plain and simple.
yes, and it can be used to reduce the county levy, period. All right? If they need
No,
to.
it has to go.
With the
to
exception
reduce
of the
county
city,
tax levy.
the only entity that they have to pay besides themselves is the city. They have no obligation unless they have revenue that exceeds their need. If the revenue exceeds their need to meet their tax burden, then they have to pay it. All right?
I'd like to see the law.
And we keep seeing that formula change. And every time it gets changed, amazingly, they take a bigger piece.
I'm curious, from being the newest lad on the council, with you folks, obviously I think a lot of people have been invested in this conversation for a while, doing a quick poll. I mean, what are your general feelings towards adopting a town tax thoughts, perspectives? I mean, I know there's a lot more in the conversation to occur, but if we're gonna develop a community budget, which is truly, you know, members of the community having a voice to it, what are your thoughts?
Devil's in the details.
But generally speaking though, like, you know, when a boat goes out in the ocean, there's a lot of ocean out there, no doubt about that, but where do you cast your sail at first? You know, is it worth investigating in that direction and looking at it? Or are you saying, nope, it's not even worth investigating, you know, I'd rather stay on the shore until something else comes along?
Well, in past years, if you took all your sales tax money, if you gave it back to the county now gives it back to you in drips and drabs. The other way, if they didn't do it that way, then you would get interest on all that sales tax money through the whole year. That's what all your good places do, good government do. They did when I was on the school board, the clerk of the works would invest that money for the school year, and you make money on that money. But the way the town takes it, you don't make money on it. And the other thing is, anybody that's ever sat on a board that has to deal with a tax rate knows that if you have a tax rate that you have to budget against, you have a lot more problems than you do when you can just basically do a lot of things and never touch that zero tax rate. And that's basically, that's where you're putting all your revenue is to your general fund. And that's what happened to the highway. You took money away from the highway and you put it in the general fund, and that created a highway tax.
Well, I think it's a topic we're going to be having, I'm pretty confident, so we're going to have some more discussion. I
think we'll need to see some good hard numbers.
Absolutely. Well, and we have to know what the good hard rules and facts are too, about how that's used and distributed. I had a recent conversation with some of the county legislators in a formal informal meeting about chargebacks for elections. And, Legislator Dane was concerned, and I kind of used the balloon analogy, but it was really Mr. Coffey that's shared that with us more than once. Felt the same. He said, you know, it's all the same taxpayers. If the county eliminates the chargebacks to the municipalities for elections, which have just become really expensive, then we're going to take it out of those taxpayers from the county budget. You know, my analogy, and I don't have the research, but at least from my perspective at this time and point, I said, but, you know, Mark, my taxpayers will have an advantage. Of course, he was very concerned, you know, what's the town going to do with the money if we give you back or we stop the chargebacks? It was a legitimate question. He said, but to me, that's a little like in a family charging one of the kids for their dinner versus dad and or mom who are out there and have jobs bring home the groceries for dinner, because what they're taking from to provide the meal is a lot different than what Junior's going to have to take from to provide the meal. Yeah, it's all the same taxpayers, but we all have some different resources and different scales of economy. And that's really the details we got to look at. I mean, it maybe doesn't, in the end of the day, mean hill of beans. There's only so much money, and the costs are what they are, and call it what you will, push it here, push it there, it comes out the same at the end of the day. And maybe not. We will be researching that. So that's a good topic, it's a good question. I think periodically we have to look at it because the game changes and the rules change.
Could I comment? I mean, Mr. Cashman asked.
I am curious.
If the town decided not to take sales tax, and incidentally, if you check the inflation rate over the years, sales tax has not kept up with the rate of inflation. So even though in 1980 it was $800 and now it's $3.5 million, $3.5 million does not buy what $800 or $400,000 that time did. If you could do a budget with a town tax and say, we need $20 million this year, we have $1.5 billion of assessed valuation, you know immediately what your tax rate is. You tax it, you tax the people, and that money is in your office in January. You now have your money to deal with over the whole year.
And then we can do, as John's saying, you can invest that money, and not in this economy, but you can invest it, you can make something versus nothing.
But it may be that interest rates are going to rise, and you listen to what the Fed's doing and so on and so forth. On the other hand, when you wait, you're on pins and needles when you're coming down to the end of the year. Are we going to get our extra, or aren't we? This year, you got an extra $350,000, which went, I believe, I looked at the AUD quickly this morning, went into the fund balance. So now you have a small fund balance, not the most healthy one, but it's getting there. But you didn't really know. We could have had another 9/11 at Christmas time, and that would have all been wiped out. So sitting around waiting for sales tax money to come in, sales tax money, which is not keeping up with inflation, to me is not really the best way to budget.
Well, it isn't, and I mean, you're singing my song, believe me, from this perspective, absolutely. And the other danger is, you're in a budget situation, the year isn't over, and you budget money you didn't get yet, but should, and a 9/11 does happen, and now you're in a heap of trouble.
You betcha.
And it's a very poor way to run anything. And, if at the end of the day, for all of us, it ends up where it would have ended up anyway, even a better way to manage and plan. You also know exactly what you've got. And if something extra comes, it does become fund balance versus spent money. I mean, there are a lot of reasons, I think, to think seriously about that are better for the town. So, good question.
It may not be politically.
Oh, it won't be popular at all, but, a lot of, that's what parenting's about, right?
But that's why I'm posing the question.
It's a good question.
You know what I mean? If we're gonna be real with one another, we need to be open to the conversation. Not only between the folks that are here, but the other regional meetings, our meetings at town hall, and et cetera, is to have that conversation. I don't care who comes up with the best answer, I just want the best answer. And I think
It just needs to be looked at.
Yeah. Oh, we are, yeah. And Debbie, you were down, you want to talk about planning?
Yes, 2 weeks ago, you were on vacation. Yay. And yay for you, right? And there was a discussion with Phil van Bargen, who came before the board to discuss the zoning ordinance. And he was asked if his department is solvent. And I'd like to know exactly what that meant.
I think I asked the question, and what I'm talking about there is, in fact, I just had an article published on that topic in the Municipal Lawyer, New York State Bar Association publication. Municipalities have to be profitable. And we have various departments, we have highway and so forth, and getting back to the talk about sales tax, you can't run a bunch of departments at a loss and then hope maybe sales tax is going to be enough to cover it. So you have to charge fees that are realistic. It may not be totally solvent, but let us say planning and zoning. Let us say just let me finish. Let us say the expense of planning and zoning for simplicity purposes are $100,000, and let us say the revenue we get from them is 20. At a minimum, we don't want going less than 20. Maybe if we can move it up to 30, it might edge its way toward profitability. Because if you don't, then you just run these deficits.
Well,
that's what we don't want.
The reason I asked is because, one, planning is not a standalone department. It falls under the administration, the general fund. It's the general fund that pays for planning.
Sure.
So, I don't understand how it can actually be solvent. Their budget is $244,000, and they've taken, in 2013, took in $7,000 in fees. They're totally at the behest of whoever comes in for site plan review. If nobody comes into site plan review, they may exit.
No, but no, that's true. You want it to be realistic anymore. The highway department, the highway tax only pays a fraction of the cost. We understand that, but we want, let us say that the highway tax represents 12% of their cost. At least let's have an effort to move maybe to 14 as opposed to letting it slip back to 10.
But I think the move is on to have it 100% of the cost, and highway we can raise a tax for the highway, but you can't raise a tax for planning.
Oh, no, you can raise fees.
So are you saying you want them to raise $244,000?
No, I'm not saying that, and I didn't suggest that, and I don't suggest that with parks and zoning. What I'm saying is, if, let us say, they're raising $7,000, what I'm saying is, let's look around and see what other comparable towns are doing, and seeing are we over or under, because I don't think it helps anybody to, I think people who use a service, as Bernie pointed out the road, the people who use that service, it's just like a toll on a bridge. The man going over the bridge and the woman going over the bridge ought to pay the toll. You shouldn't say the bridge is free and then spread it out among everybody else. So if I'm Holiday Inn and going there for planning and say X dollars are expended in that process, I think Holiday Inn should pay certainly a pretty good share of that as opposed to making people in Champlain Park pay for it.
Well, so let me go back. Last year they made 11,000, or in 2012 they took in 11,000, and in 2013 they took in 7,000. But I think they have plugged in the figures and pretty much have come to the conclusion that ours are comparable to other towns our size.
Well, I don't know if that was clear from the discussion, but I don't know. But what they are, like I said, this article I wrote on profitability, actually Clinton County came out quite well, but you have huge counties, particularly Suffolk County, other counties, they're having a minus cash flow, and they're not reinvesting in the infrastructure. And you've got a Detroit, maybe it's a little further down the conveyor belt, but it's coming.
No doubt.
Well, one of the things we began talking about in department head meetings was to run your department like a business. We never really defined that and kept it kind of abstract, but what the goal is to try and think about their needs, department heads in the department, if it was a small department like planning or a large one like water sewer. And how are you, Mr. Manager, running your store? The mall shouldn't be subsidizing your store, with the reality that a department like water, sewer, highway has a different stream of revenue and a different way to get revenue. But as we've had that, it did a couple of things. One, every time a department head comes to me, in fact, we had an interesting scenario, it might even surface later tonight, with a request, the department head cut himself. Every time they come, cut his request.
Oh, cut his, oh.
We're talking about funds.
He cut himself? Oh dear.
Well, we're hoping they're not gonna do that.
To sell his blood.
We want them to be healthy.
And it's helped. I was concerned there was a mindset that the town was this sugar daddy, and if it was needed, I don't care if it was a snowplow or a chainsaw, we just get it. And John spent a lot of time in schools. I think in classrooms, oftentimes teachers, everything they wanted is for the kids, of course. Everything they want to do is for the kids. Was to have the best program, the best environment, the best books, the best everything. And it's paid for. That's not my problem. My job's to teach, your job's to give me the resources to do it. I saw that same kind of model. My job's to provide the best service, have the best equipment, get out there, like a fire department. And it's like a life insurance, like a lot of things that, we want to be right. We don't want to be caught short. We don't want yours to be the house we lose. But there's a reality, somebody's still got to pay for it. And there's a break point at which what we're trying to achieve and get may not be comparable to the need. So run it like a business. we're not able to just keep writing checks for things anymore. And even with and as we looked at this with planning, and we did it with dog licensing, we've been working on it with water and other things, there's no free lunch. We can't subsidize. And even if a department can only generate a quarter of the revenue they need, it's better than an eighth. And that's a quarter that, you know, the general fund or some other, you know, resource doesn't have to subsidize. And it's made us look at other communities, what do they charge, trying to find comparable communities, socioeconomic, median incomes and so on, population size, and take a look at what are we doing? And sometimes you find out, well, we're fair, we're in the game, and other times you realize, you know, we're low. I don't remember the exact number. You've got a great brain for numbers, Debbie. Maybe you know. I want to say the town of Plattsburgh has a highway tax of over $4 a thousand. I said town of Plattsburgh, town of Cerner. Town of Cerner, over $4 a thousand. And we're at like maybe 90 cents, but you know what they get for that for what we can get for 90 cents are just two different beasts. So you can't always just compare the numbers. It's very complex. The important thing is our departments need to know you can't have anything and everything. Everything costs, and you've got to help us with keeping the costs controlled. And you know, we're going to keep looking at that. You know, we can't keep putting it on the community. The only two things you can do is either make more money or spend less money. And realistically, you do some combination of both. And when we've got a project coming in, and maybe it's a $3 million construction project, and I'm making the numbers up, but they're not far off base, and they're paying $50 for a review, that's ridiculous. I mean, it just doesn't make sense.
I disagree with what.
Yeah, and I don't have it in front of me. But that's the scale that we looked at that's ridiculous. Somebody's spending that kind of money to be here. Why are we putting on the back of all the community the cost for the service? As Jim said, if you're crossing the bridge, you should be paying, not people who don't cross the bridge. And if we do that, when it's time to fix the bridge, we'll be ready.
But the taxpayers have to pay it because they're part of the general fund. I mean, their salaries and all that kind of stuff.
There's a little asterisk goes in there. I completely agree with you. The taxpayers have to pay, I do a little unique, what we're unable to gather through sales tax fees, etc. So the more we get that way, the less the taxpayer has to.
And we have some fees that are charged, and these are some of the fees that are being looked at. They're charged, they're preliminary fees that are charged, and these fees really require the personal time of the people in the planning and in the zoning offices.
Right.
And they do not necessarily result in anything happening.
I know that.
They simply result in a plan being looked at, reviewed, and that kind of puts that plan in the queue for a while, okay? And the amount of fees that have been charged previously for those have been minuscule, and they should be larger, okay?
So
We also have fees, the example, and one was shared with me recently, and I believe the number was like, $165,000 was the amount of money that was being paid for this particular project, okay? And the fee was $50. Well, that was a disproportionately low fee, okay? When you look at how much time was spent looking at a project that had that kind of, that cost that kind of money, okay, it would have been realistic for that to be, perhaps a $1,650 fee. And then, okay, the cost would have been borne, more realistically, a far greater percentage would have been borne by the fee and less by the general taxpayers.
But this is not a matter of solvency.
Pardon?
This is not a matter of
Well,
solvency.
no, but I think you grabbed the word solvency and went,
Well,
All the way with it.
no, I was trying to figure, what
Yeah.
are they talking about? This department has to be solvent. It doesn't even raise any money.
I never said it had to be solvent, what we're talking about is, are you getting close, or is there any relationship between our fees and the budget? I think it would be helpful for people saying, the highway department say, we're spending X and we're bringing in Y on the tax. And that shortfall has to be made up. And the question is, who's going to make it up? So I think every department head should be conscious of trying to narrow the gap somewhat. And I understand, say maybe Parks and Rec, obviously they do a lot of things that aren't going to be profitable, and we understand that. But on the other, there are things where people maybe engaging in certain activities could pay more money. And like I said, when they talk about, as they talk about the free lunch or the free bridge, there's no free bridge.
No doubt.
And that's why maybe, not to go far afield, the airline industry, people now are getting mad. People say, oh, I used to fly, the drinks are free, the meals are free, and the baggage are free. No, they weren't. But what it was, they pushed it off on other people. Now we're saying, if I want to have 3 gin and tonics, that's fine, but you shouldn't be paying for it.
No doubt that fees can be raised here and there, but like I said, isn't going to make the department.
We're not expecting them to be self-sufficient.
And the other thing is,
It's not,
sometimes,
it's not.
sometimes in a discussion, when you say something, use a phrase or something, you're not using it properly, or you misspeak. I mean, there are times when we're saying solvent, we're not, we didn't exactly.
It's not the first
I
time it's
can-
been used, however.
no, but I can tell you in that meeting that night, because I chaired that
You
meeting
chaired
that
it,
night.
correct.
Okay, the discussion was not nearly as focused on the term solvency as it was focused on when are we going to see the fee schedule that we've been talking about for quite a while, that we've been waiting to see emerge. And that was what the conversation was really about. And that was where are we in this process of getting a more realistic fee schedule that we can take a look at and potentially consider. And that was the real focus of that meeting.
Well, words have meaning, and so that's what I was trying to
Yeah.
ascertain.
And that fee schedule will not in any way get that department to the point of solvency.
No way.
No way.
I mean, the whole solvency issue came into play when Mr. Coffey said to the finance manager, if we get, and this was a while back during budget season, if we get highway off of sales tax, will the town general fund be solvent? And the finance manager said yes. So this term has been going around a while. So when you said solvent, I'm thinking, how on earth can a planning department that has a $244,000 budget be solvent with $7,000?
Okay.
No way.
So we
You better start using the word self-sustaining, maybe.
Yeah, you're talking about,
Move towards solvency.
Yeah, and it's taken a while, and just because we got a budget didn't mean any of that conversation stopped.
Sure.
And it won't stop
It's still
until
going on.
we feel
My point.
the town's budget is solid and we are sustainable. And it might be a combination of all the things we've been talking about, but we're going to make sure that happens. That's our responsibility. And each of these departments becomes a spoke of a piece. Well, one of the things that happened in planning, and all open transparency that I can think of, we had for a long time in the books the ability to charge back to a project the cost of consulting fees, and there are times when we have to bring in outside experts to do whatever. We weren't doing that.
It's happening now.
But now we're charging.
I know that.
And those kinds of, when we work with our departments, the word on my tongue was pressure, our departments, they start looking rightfully at ways to help with the cost of their department. And that was one of the things well, we could be, why haven't you been doing that then? So it's getting some results, and, you know, we will probably internally continue to ask them to be solvent, to be self-sustaining, to be independent, with the reality that we still have to make it work, but they're gonna try harder to close that gap by making more and spending less. Okay?
Fine.
Good question. That's a lot of times what I would hope these meetings could be, just a good give and take and debate. We learn things, we get to share some things, and hopefully things, you know, are going to work out a little better. We normally are a little more rigid with the, does anybody want to talk, and did you sign all that? But certainly today, if anyone has any other questions, comments, concerns, anybody here, everybody has different roles, and we'll respond to them. If not, call any of us, email just at the town department, and we'll get some feedback. I always remind everybody, if I tell you something different tomorrow than I told you today, it might be because in between I learned something new. A lot of things happen, and they happen fast. But thank you. And otherwise, I'm just going to continue to roll through the items on our agenda for the evening. Which takes me down to local law number 1, which is a draft. Mr. Coffey prepared this, shared it with everyone. I don't know if anyone has any comments, concerns with this in any form, shape, or manner.
Surely putting on the sidewalk, not any other object, in terms of snow.
I'm not sure I know what you mean by that, Tom.
Well, so keeping town sidewalks clear of snow, ice, and debris, right?
Right.
So, that's what I read, and maybe I missed something, or the thing was that so that no one purposely puts snow or debris on a sidewalk that would hinder somebody's phone.
More so than like the city where we're after people to remove it. We're trying to prevent people from pushing there. And a lot of the problem becomes, especially the Route 3 corridor, where you have a lot of retail business, they have their parking areas or the display areas for their vehicles, and they have someone comes in at night and move the cars back, they push the snow up against the road, plows go through, dump it on the sidewalk, between the two of them, they win. And in the same vein of the discussion for the last half hour, there'd be penalties and offenses, because when our crew has to go through and clean the sidewalks, which we do, it's time, money, and equipment. And we do it because others are pushing their snow on the sidewalks. They're going to have to be accountable to do their part, or they're going to pay the price.
And also, Lee, the debris part was that some of the things that were put on the sidewalk ruined our equipment, or caused us to have to repair equipment, which cost more days and cost more man-hours to fix the equipment.
Correct. That is the essence, right, Jim?
That's correct.
Unless someone, and you may come up with something in the 11th hour, which happens with all of us, I'll begin to prepare a draft resolution then, so we can start to act on this as soon as the next meeting.
I think it's also important to comment that our highway superintendent has been very clear that what he's looking for with this legislation is to have something that he can use to job on with business owners, in particular, again, on that Route 3 corridor, where he can go in and he can show somebody and talk with them about what the responsibility is and where the responsibility lies. And the person can't say, well, that isn't mine, I didn't do that, George did that. He plowed, he pushed the snow over there. Well, George is working for you. You hired George, and if that's where George is pushing the snow, you need to tell George to push the snow someplace else. And hopefully by just some good conversations, we can make this happen. And there'll be those 2 or 3 that'll decide they want to, bark back, and, then we'll have to bark back, and, that'll get worked out. But we don't envision that this thing is going to become the kind of, situation you see on, in the speak out and in the newspaper in the city, and their sidewalk thing. That's not what this is about. What we've had happen, and we cannot continue to have it happen, is we go through and we plow the sidewalks, that we have in the town, and then we have the sidewalks, subsequently get plugged, and we'll end up with infirm people who will literally be back out into the roadway. And we've had a couple accidents where people were, in wheelchairs or whatever, and they were in the roadway because they couldn't be in the sidewalk. And so we're trying to address the issue and just get people to understand that they've got a responsibility to recognize that they've got a role in keeping those sidewalks open.
As we grow, some of the numbers don't work well for us. We talked a lot about budget tonight. We've got about 100 miles of town roads. It's a lot of work to maintain them, clean them. You mentioned all the sidewalk areas. It's tough keeping up with it.
John's comment about, sales tax revenue and whatever. We plow, and this happens with every town in the county, with the exception of one. Blackbrook does not plow county roads because they came to the conclusion that they don't get paid adequately to plow those roads, and it's a problem. We don't get paid what we should get paid to plow those roads, and consequently that could be an issue. But it's one of the things that happens when the state builds a road. The state will put a sidewalk in on that road. They're required by federal law to do sidewalks on state roads now. When they do that, they'll put a sidewalk in. But when they put that sidewalk in, that's an unfunded mandate for the town. We have to take care of that sidewalk, and we have to maintain the sidewalk. And maintain it means not only keep it in good repair, but it also means we have to plow it. So that's, there's a limit as to how many times we're going to plow that sidewalk.
If this law gets instituted, I'm grinning. I have to express my grin, explain my grin. If this law gets passed, it's going to be interesting because we have those sidewalks, our little unfunded mandate to take care of them, and those good state plows are no small part of the problem, dumping the snow in the sidewalk. So it'll be interesting to see how that gets worked out. That's kind of a sidebar we're going to have to work on because that can be a problem.
Bernie, can I ask, speaking of roads, have they started sweeping now?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, they have been. They started, I think Jim said this year they started everything on the west end and are coming this way. Last year I think they started on this end and Cliff Haven, so he's trying to mix it up. They're out there.
Some people have asked, that's why I thought.
We do a rotation on how the roads get done so that there's a fairness to it. Because it used to be, it wasn't quite that way. And that was a problem.
It's a problem for whoever's not getting rid of first. Okay, anyone have any other comments on local law number 1? If not, we'll rock on that. Local peddlers licensing local law. We had a lot of discussion. We, I think, came up with a solution of what to do, which was to rescind the one item we had and pull the precious stones into the peddler's law. I don't have a draft of that. The only thing I've got is a copy of the one from '94. What's
Well, the one with the peddlers, I had sent that in the email, the peddler's law, wasn't the peddler's law, it appears to be part of the zoning.
right?
So you'd have to amend this, if you want to get rid of, it appears, I don't know why it was done this way, but anyway. With the sale of gold and silver, I don't think that should be, I think peddlers, all peddlers should be treated the same way.
We've got some changes coming in our zoning, and that ought to get worked into that change.
That's a good thought.
to delete that.
Get that out. And why don't we get that out and we can maybe amend the old zoning, the old peddler's law isn't a bad law.
1995.
Just need to update it.
Yeah, and why don't, if there's an agreement, I can update that.
Why don't you work
I'd
on
update
that?
the old one if, it seems to be fairly well written. The numbers have to be, I don't know, they did it a funny way. They had the law and then they passed a resolution on the fee. I think we put the,
They did that so they could change the fees. They were aware that you were gonna be counted towards.
they were very prescient in that respect, I'll say that. But, so why don't I change this, we'll put the fee in, we'll also put the fee can be changed by resolution later on.
And if this is ready to go concurrent with the change in the zoning, we can do both and get concurrent. We actually should change the zoning first, I would suspect by resolution, and then do this one. So we're not in conflict with local law.
Yeah, we have to get rid of the zoning.
All right.
You can only do it 3 days, you know very well.
Jim will do a draft. I don't know about that. How many 3-day lawn sales can I have in a year and can they be concurrent?
Yeah, well,
Ricky, the going out of business, I've got that here. My assumption is that's fine the way it is. We just have to implement it. And that comes out of your office, doesn't it? So you're all set, you got what you need, you're
Right,
comfortable?
well, the only question is, it comes out of our office, but you want me to forward it to Stevie? To go out and enforce it, or how are we gonna do that? That was the biggest question. And I know that it fell through the cracks because there's a lot of, like, what just transpired with a lot of going out of business, that main store.
Yeah.
But they encompassed everything in the northeast, they brought to this store to try and get rid of it.
But I think you do it just like you do any other permitting process that comes out of your office. If they fail to do that, and obviously somebody's got to tell us, and you do the same as you do with junkyards, anything else, then if they fail, you would move it through Jim and it'll end up in court downstairs. They'll be operating illegally without a permit, shut them down, and levy the fine. But I want you to be sure you got all the process so you're ready to rock with it. We maybe should do something in the press. I don't know if it should be of interest or a legal note, Jim, that we can document. We reminded the business community that there is a permit required, certain guidelines.
The only problem, yeah, we don't put any legal notices because nobody ever reads those.
So of interest would be sufficient. What's, right?
Yeah, public, yeah, some public interest.
So draft something, Rick, I'll look at it, we'll fly it by Jim, that way we're reminding people. And we'll put that to the file as well.
Good idea.
My other item, the ARC letter, before we get to the drafts, and kudos to Mike, I don't have it broken out, but as you recall, Mike pushed us a little more this year, challenged us. And the challenge certainly was a little bit of a push, I guess, to support the food drive that was being done by the ARC, sponsored by them, benefiting the JCO and Plattsburgh Faith food shelves, et cetera, et cetera. They had a goal of 3,000 pounds of food this year, and they did gather over 4,069. So it was a real benefit. We got a nice letter of appreciation, and again, Mike, I share that for you as much as anything because you supported that very strongly.
Just so you know, from members of the council, folks in town hall, and community members, I think the final number, I weighed a good portion of the food. It was approximately 250 pounds of food that were collected through town hall, so approximately. So.
Good, I was curious what that was, thank you. Next, we had 2 resolutions that were tabled. Yes, sir.
Do you have the reports first?
I'm not aware of any. Does anyone have a report?
I got a lot of paper report.
I don't have one in my packet. For committee report?
Must have been stuck in mine.
Water wastewater committee report?
Yeah.
Oh, go ahead and do it.
Water wastewater. Well, it's water and wastewater.
What's the date report from data that?
It's the March report.
Is that from the department?
I don't know, yeah.
Oh, okay.
So I guess it was one we did last time, but I got it in my,
That's,
I got it in my packet this time.
well, that could be, but that would just be part of the draft resolution.
Okay, well, the only thing.
I got it.
The only thing I wanted to point out was that at the Katyville wastewater treatment plant, they had to clean out the well, and they pulled the pump multiple times because there were amounts of rags that are being disposed of. So we gotta get people to understand that you can't put all this rags down. It costs a lot of money to do that and to have these things, having to be cleaned out. And I wasn't where the high level alarm at the Champlain Park lift station, but we had people there around the clock until that had been fixed. So obviously, water and wastewater people have been out quite a bit, working hard.
And been out with a smaller group.
Yeah.
That report is the department's report. When you mention the committee, that's next to the agenda for the board's
I
advice.
meant department.
All right. Yeah.
Again, I didn't mean that it was solvent or anything, I just, it was actually the department report.
Those aren't solid rags. Okay, so we have two resolutions that were tabled. They need to come back and be acted on at this session. So, Ricky, I assume you have those, 146, 145, 146?
That's right.
So, Resolution 145, request to attend annual New York American Water Works arbitration technical conference.
Whereas the town Plattsburgh Water and Wastewater Department is required to maintain professional training and licensing. Whereas it is in the best interest of the town to remain current and informed concerning changes in the water and wastewater regulations, technology updates, and related system efficiencies. Therefore, be resolved that the Water and Wastewater Director, Scott Stoddard, be allowed to attend at the annual technical conference held on April the 17th to 19th, 2000. Be resolved that Scott Stoddard of the Water and Wastewater Department be allowed to attend the annual wastewater annual conference and exposition to be held from June 9th to June 12th in Boston, Mass. And it be further resolved that $1,705.73 for lodging and meals and $980 for registration, $228.56 for parking and tolls, etc. From Scott Stoddard be charged to the water and wastewater budget.
Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Okay, do I have a second? Do we have a second? If not, then the resolution would simply fall off the table. It doesn't come for action. Resolution 146, request to attend American Water Works annual conference and exposition.
Whereas the town Plattsburgh Water and Wastewater Department is required to maintain professional training and licensing. And whereas it is the best interest of the town to remain current and informed concerning changes in the water and wastewater regulations, technology updates, and related system efficiencies. Therefore, be resolved that Paul Wright of the Water and Wastewater Department, Assistant Superintendent, be allowed to attend the annual wastewater conference and exposition to be held June 9th through the 13th, 2014 in Boston, Mass. And it be further resolved that $1,459.17 for lodging and meals and $880 for registration for the conference for Mr. Wright be charged to the Water and Wastewater Department budget.
Have a motion. Do we have a motion for that resolution? Then it will also fall off the table. Now, Rick, do you have a 153 and 154?
Yes.
I would note on 153, if you look at the first resolve, please, that should read June 9 through June 12. Just go ahead and change that before we even start. So we will go to resolution 153.
Whereas the town of Plattsburgh Water and Wastewater Department is required to maintain professional training and licensing. And whereas it is in the best interest of the town to remain current and informed concerning changes in the water and wastewater regulations, technology updates, and related system efficiency. Therefore be resolved that Paul Wright from the Water and Wastewater Department be allowed to attend the annual wastewater conference and exhibition held from June 9th to June 12, 2014 in Boston, Massachusetts. And to be further resolved that $1,477.17 for lodging and meals and $880 for registration for the conference for Paul Wright to be charged to the water and wastewater budget.
Can we have a motion?
So moved.
Tom Wood, sorry. Do we have a second on that?
Okay.
Second, Mr. Mannix. All right. Discussion. I'm just discovering, at least with Mike, that the packet with the revised request information and the agenda for the program may not have gotten to you all, and that was a goal of mine to make that happen. I've got it, but I guess it didn't get copied.
Yes, sir?
153, 154.
150, oh no, I'm sorry. One more time, hold it.
For 150.
I've got 153 and 4 here for you.
Well, I pulled it up online.
No,
Yeah. Yeah, because I know that basically starts on something.
The resolution, yes, but you don't have the background.
I have all of that.
I didn't have the background information, but I looked at it online.
Okay.
So,
Does anybody need it? I've got it.
The summarizing the change on that, they won't be leaving on the 13th, they would leave on the 12th. The conference formally ends at roughly noon on the 12th, I think you saw mine, I've got it. And the problem that we also discovered though is the Monday morning program. The two of them are not staying at the conference site. They've got roughly 3 miles to get to it, which can certainly not the same as 3 miles from Plattsburgh Town Hall. They were planning on leaving at roughly 4 in the morning, Monday morning to get there. They didn't feel they should leave the day before, even though there are some conference activities going on Sunday. The important part, of course, is Monday. And I told Scott that was ridiculous. You're not going to leave at 4 o'clock in the morning and navigate your way in there and through the rush hour of Boston traffic and try to be in a position to be gathering quality information at the same time. Their Sunday general registration begins. There are some general sessions, workshops, etc. That's the meat and potatoes is of course Monday morning, but they need to get in. So they would leave on Sunday and then come home a day earlier than the previous request. It also reduced the cost as a result of that, and it's my fault. Scott gave me the breakdown of the cost and how that worked out very specifically. Apologize that didn't get you. We're getting there. It's not the 11th hour yet to make a decision. But if you want to table it, having seen that, certainly support that.
Did you send us this with the specific information on that?
You've got their registration, but do you have the conference information?
There's all the time.
Oh, you do? Okay, well, Mike, why don't
For some reason, it didn't come to the packet, so I've seen it online, so
Okay.
I'm comfortable with the material.
I assumed everybody did get it, so you got it, okay, so you got what you need. That's the essence, the cost is down, they should have gone earlier, as I mentioned before, they were concerned because we didn't allow that with a Placid trip, this isn't Placid. I wouldn't expect anybody to get up at 4 in the morning and be where they need to be for 8 o'clock and check in and everything else. But it did lower the cost some as well, so we discussed it.
The resolution is probably a problem.
It should, because you're going to be spending the night of the 8th.
Yes, so I think you should say where it says resolve, or you change it to June 12th, I think now you should put it June.
Because he's got,
Oh, he's got the 8th in his request, but
Yeah, but
the
it's also,
9th in his
but
letter.
that's, see, the date on the,
Yep.
I got the calendar here, so that's,
Yep, yep.
we're waiting the date.
The resolution, if you're going to pass it, should be amended to read the 8th, not the 9th.
So there's no savings.
They would leave on the 8th.
And they'll actually be attending things on the date.
The dollar amount is,
It's like,
The same.
total, there's a slight change.
147717.
I think for the value of, again, it's a learning curve, just to make sure that the two numbers match up.
Well, if you want to have more time with it, I certainly support that, but we need a motion to do it.
I'll put that out there in consideration.
I'll second that motion too.
So you're saying this obligation of travel is not correct?
That is okay.
And it does list the cost of these things. I mean, is that, so you're not saying that that's the 8th?
That should be the 8th. That's correct. The resolution had the 9th by the state.
What
Should be the 8th.
What we're checking is this?
There's some interest in making sure the totals, because the way you brand the resolution is a little different than the travel.
Well,
I guess our suggestion on this, why don't we just wait?
yeah.
We're
We'll have more time.
Next month, okay, we'll get the right
Okay.
one.
We just need to know how much it is.
There you go. All right, we have a motion to table and a second. Any further discussion on that? Let's get a roll call at the table.
Thomas Wood,
Yes.
Mark Manning,
Yes.
Michael Cash,
Yes.
Ernie Bass.
Yes, so this one will be tabled. And I am not even going to go to 54 because we should do the same until we further discuss that. And that one also needs to go to the 8th for the 12th. Okay. Yep.
Well, we're definitely at 12, which is discussion.
Okay. The next items are just drafts. We do have the water wastewater report, the minutes from the previous meeting. We would also, on the 5th, next Monday, set a public hearing concerning the property at the Stafford Road, which I think you're familiar with. I've got a lot of documentation on that, and soon you do as well.
And the proper time has gone by?
Yes, we're right in the sequence with time. Yep. There was concern that we would pass at a time, have the hearing pass at a timely fashion so we could get it taken care of before it got to the fall, but Steve is comfortable with the time.
Good.
Family Medical Leave Act Policy Revision. You should have a copy of that. Pat has reviewed that. Some of the legislation changed, so we need to do an update. And that's that. Is there, if anyone has any questions, I suggest you take them to Pat for you. The next one I've got, I ran off the end of the day. Pass 3 of these down. Well, those that way. Give you a little bit of background, what's going on with this. We have a fleet vehicle with approximately 110,000 miles on it. It's earned its keep. That's the gray Cherokee. It's had some work. It's a 2004. You might recall we recently had to put $3,000–4,000 into the Gold Jeep. The rear end went on that. Marty, you had some problems with that one day. Others have. Mr. Lombardi was on his way to a meeting and the whole rear end seized up. Steve's, as I said, has under 10,000. We've been looking at what to do, and he has investigated going with lease versus buy. And, rent over own, it's one of those debates. So I suggested to Steve he get some information. He did. He went out to find out from some other municipalities, and they do. And take advantage of leasing versus owning. And what we came up with, he went out to get some bids, and that wasn't easy. Companies really weren't extremely interested in that, but he was able to get some bids, and including a couple from the area, and came up with a low bid of $277.87, including trade, of the to purchase a 2014 Jeep Cherokee Sport 4x4. You do the math on that $277. It's less than the work we recently did on the Gold Jeep that was newer. Even with our mechanics, time is still money, but even with them, buying parts are expensive. How much do you want to keep putting into a Jeep that's got 110,000 miles? We spent quite a bit of time on this, and I know you're just getting this today. Everybody's got to look everything over. This would be 12,000 miles. We believe that would be within our range. Some years a little less, some years a little more. We think that would average out okay. It is a bumper-to-bumper warranty. I think it even includes oil changes.
I just wondering the amount would be about 13,000, whatever that was.
Something like that.
And that be bid schedule?
Over 20 years.
Yeah.
This would require us to get 3 quotes.
Between 5 and 20.
Okay, I'll take a look.
Yep, take a look. I mean, again, this is the first time you all see it. Everybody looks at things with different perspectives.
This, is it?
Nope. Probably, Tom. That's a good question.
Well, that'd be a separate thing, that wouldn't influence this number here, so.
No, it wouldn't, but that would be
Well,
something
it will on
to
the
be
back end.
conscious of.
It will on
That's
the
right.
back end.
If there's damage on wear and tear beyond the norm.
Yeah, do we then have to make a whole, or do we have to pay first the whole thing, or whatever? I mean, that makes a difference to what I...
Oh, no, I'm sorry, it makes a difference financially, I think it makes a legal.
Yeah, Yeah, well, I'm looking at it financially, not,
Okay.
you look at it, okay, I'll look at it
All right,
financially.
that makes
Yeah,
sense.
I think probably, Tom, that would be correct. I've never heard of a lease that if you don't bring it back in the normal condition of 3 years of wear, there will be some cost.
And he drives everywhere.
Yes, but if you look at the vehicles, then you take good care of them, and that particular vehicle with 110,000 miles, it's not dented, it's not dinged, it's just tired, rusty, and worn out. But certainly those things could happen, and if they did, we'd have to take care of them along
So
the
if
way.
it's tired, rusty, and worn out,
If,
we don't have to pay for it.
it's not going to get tired, rusty, and worn out in 3 years.
Right.
If we own it and it slides off the road, hits a telephone pole, what do you think's gonna happen? If we lease it and it goes off the road, hits a telephone pole, same thing's gonna happen. Really doesn't make a big difference. Fiscally, it looks like the way to go, and other municipalities have used a lease payment to keep costs down.
Well, it always has to be as a commercial. Yeah, they don't, and that's why they have regulations about this. They're making profit, they give them some money.
Sure.
So perhaps,
So you're just bringing us cost for draft?
This is for draft.
Well,
These-
yeah.
These quotes won't last forever.
exactly, well, they won't last forever, because they're gonna, we have to pass this next month, so.
I would like, if we're gonna do it, we need to do it. So you've got a week to review it, talk to Steve, do some research.
And if that's the case, we've got to do the lease, and we gotta have a good resolution.
Well, they normally seem to have second. I don't know. And any other comments or thoughts right now? As I said, you got a week. Dollars and cents, it makes sense.
Does the, a lease impact the town's insurance coverage at all?
I don't know why it would, any more than if you were I lease our insurance coverage, we own it for the 3 years.
I'm just making sure.
What's the question to ask?
As an independent owner versus a municipality type of thing, multiple drivers versus.
Yeah, I will find out. Good question. I don't know. As you think of questions or concerns with that, let me know and I will get answers and get them back to everybody. So right now I've got a couple with an assumption about the normal wear clauses of any lease, just like if you go over the miles, you're gonna pay. And insurance impacts because of, as a lease versus own.
Yeah, there's some kind of contract on sign.
Well, there's a contract. No. Yes. That's probably smart for you to get a copy. That's a good. Copy at least to Jim and to the insurance. That's good. All right, anything else on that? I would be disappointed. But that's what we need to do, because everybody, again, with your experience and background, you see things different. And if we don't put them in the hopper that way, we're not going to get those questions answered. Okay, anybody have anything else? All right, no, we'll see you back at the ranch. I'm going to